I kicked open the front door of my mother's house in Maple Ridge Estates, my boots soaked in snow and my heart burning with a rage I had never felt before. The warm amber glow of the fireplace illuminated the spacious living room where my family sat in luxury, laughing, toasting wine glasses, and enjoying Christmas Eve as if nothing was wrong. As if my sister wasn't freezing to death just yards away. In my arms, trembling like a bird caught in a blizzard, was Emily barefoot, shivering, her lips blue and eyelashes frosted with tiny ice crystals. She had been left outside in the 20-degree cold, without a coat, without warmth, without love. I stood in the center of their grand living room, the cheerful Christmas music creating a sickening backdrop to the scene before me, and said only 6 words that made the room go silent. You left her out to die. Everything stopped. Wine glasses froze in midair. Faces drained of color. My mother's perfectly made-up face crumpled in confusion, then shock. My stepfather Gerald's expression hardened into stone. My stepsister Ashley's mouth hung open, her carefully applied lipstick a garish red against her suddenly pale face. But I wasn't done. Not after what I'd just witnessed in their backyard. It had been 3 years since I'd last set foot in this house. 3 years of trying to build my own life in Asheville, North Carolina, where I worked as a taekwondo instructor at a community center. 3 years of missed holidays, ignored birthday cards, and the occasional strained phone call with my mother. Emily was the only one who still reached out regularly. My baby sister, 10 years younger than me at just 22, had always been the family peacemaker. The one who tried to bridge the gap between me and our mother after Dad died. The one who begged me to come home for Christmas this year. Just once, Kate, she had pleaded last week on the phone. For me, I need you here. There was something in her voice, a tremor, a hidden plea that made me book the flight. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. I wanted to surprise Emily, to see her face light up when I appeared at the door. Instead, I found her huddled on a stone bench in the backyard, wearing only a thin blouse and jeans, no shoes, no coat, while the temperature plummeted and snow began to fall. Emily? I had called out, confused at first. I thought I was seeing things. She looked up, her face streaked with tears that were half frozen on her cheeks. Kate? She whispered, as if she couldn't believe I was real. I ran to her, tearing off my own coat to wrap around her shoulders. What the hell are you doing out here? It's freezing! Her body was shaking uncontrollably. They said, her teeth chattered violently. They said I was too emotional to be around tonight, that I'd ruin Christmas. Something cold and hard settled in my chest as I helped her to her feet. Her skin was like ice. How long have you been out here? I don't know. An hour, maybe? She could barely stand. Gerald said I needed to calm down before I could come back in. Mom agreed. I scooped her up into my arms, horrified at how light she felt, and carried her through the snow toward the front door. Through the large bay windows, I could see them all. My mother, Gerald, Ashley, and several of Gerald's relatives laughing, eating, drinking. Living it up while Emily sat freezing in the dark. And now here I stood, Emily trembling in my arms, facing the family that had cast her out like garbage. My mother recovered first. Kate, what a surprise! She rose from her seat, wine glass still in hand, a plastic smile stretching across her face. We didn't expect you. Clearly, I said, my voice cold. Gerald stood up, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the expensive Persian rug. What's going on here? Emily was just getting some air. Air? I spat the word out. She's hypothermic. Look at her! Ashley rolled her eyes dramatically. She's always doing this for attention. Every family gathering, some drama with Emily. I felt my sister flinch in my arms, her body curling tighter into itself with shame. She's barefoot in 20-degree weather, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. She could have frostbite. She could have died out there. My mother approached cautiously, as if Emily and I were wild animals that might attack. You're overreacting, Catherine. Emily was upset earlier, making a scene about, well, it doesn't matter. Gerald suggested she take some time outside to collect herself. That's all? That's all? My voice rose. Look at her. Her lips are blue. I carried Emily to the couch and gently set her down, keeping my coat wrapped tightly around her. I knelt in front of her, taking her icy hands in mine, rubbing them to restore circulation. I'm going to get you warm, okay? Then we're leaving. You just got here, my mother protested, glancing nervously at Gerald, Gerald cleared his throat. Emily is welcome to stay. You, however, save it, I cut him off. I don't want to hear anything from the man who locked my sister out in a snowstorm. The door wasn't locked, Ashley interjected, as if that made everything okay. I ignored her, focusing instead on Emily. Her shivering was beginning to subside, but her eyes were vacant, staring at nothing. I recognized that look from my work with trauma victims. She was shutting down. Em, can you hear me? I'm going to get you some warm clothes, and then we're going to a hospital. No hospital, she mumbled. Please, I'm okay. You're not okay, I insisted gently. I'll make her some tea, my mother offered, suddenly playing the concerned parent now that there was an audience. I stood up, placing myself between Emily and the rest of them. What happened? I demanded. The truth. Now. The room fell silent again. Gerald's relatives shifted uncomfortably, some pretending to be fascinated by their plates of food. It was nothing, Gerald finally said. Emily was being hysterical about her medication, making accusations, ruining Christmas Eve dinner. I simply suggested she take some time to calm down. What medication? I asked, turning to Emily. She looked away, shame coloring her pale cheeks. My antidepressants, she whispered. Mom and Gerald think I don't need them. That I'm just weak. Something inside me snapped. All the years of tension, of watching my mother choose Gerald and his money over her own daughters, of seeing Emily slowly crumble under their roof while I built my life elsewhere, it all came crashing down on me at once. Get her shoes and a warm sweater, I ordered my mother. Now. To my surprise, she obeyed, hurrying up the stairs. I turned to Gerald. If she has frostbite, if there's any permanent damage, I will make sure everyone in Maple Ridge Estates knows exactly what kind of people you are. He stepped toward me, his voice low. You always were the troublemaker, Catherine. Always so dramatic. Emily needs structure, discipline, not those pills that make her a zombie. What she needs, I said, matching his quiet tone, is to be away from you. My mother returned with Emily's boots and a thick sweater. As I helped Emily put them on, I made my decision. I wasn't leaving her here. Not for another minute. We're going, I told Emily softly. I'm taking you home with me. She nodded weakly, leaning against me as I helped her stand. You can't just take her, my mother protested. It's Christmas Eve, what will people think? I stared at her. This woman who had given birth to me, who had once been my hero, now reduced to caring only about appearances. They'll think, I said slowly, that you left your daughter out to die. And I saved her. The motel room was small but clean, with 2 queen beds covered in faded floral bedspreads and a bathroom that smelled of industrial bleach. It wasn't much, but it was warm, and right now, that was all that mattered. Emily sat on the edge of one bed, wrapped in every blanket we could find. Her hands curled around a styrofoam cup of hot chocolate from the vending machine down the hall. Color had returned to her face, but her eyes still held that vacant, haunted look. The doctor said you'll be okay, I reminded her gently. No frostbite, just mild hypothermia. After leaving our mother's house, I had taken Emily straight to the emergency room at Boise General Hospital. The doctor who examined her had been concerned but reassuring. Emily was lucky. No permanent damage, though she needed to stay warm and rest. Why didn't you call me? I asked, sitting down beside her. If things were this bad, why didn't you tell me? Emily stared into her cup. I did call you. I asked you to come for Christmas. But you didn't tell me what was happening, she shrugged. A small, defeated gesture. What was I supposed to say? Hey, sis, Mom and Gerald think I'm crazy and they're flushing my meds down the toilet? You already hate them. I didn't want to make it worse. My heart twisted painfully in my chest. I don't hate Mom, I said, though the words felt hollow after tonight. I hate what she's become since she married Gerald. She loves him, Emily said, but there was no conviction in her voice. She chose him over us. Over you? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my tone. That's not love, Em. I don't know what that is. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the hum of the ancient heater beneath the window. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the motel parking lot in white. How long has this been going on? I finally asked. The medication thing, the punishment. Emily's shoulders slumped. Since I moved back home after college. About a year. At first, it was just comments. Gerald saying I was too sensitive, that I used depression as an excuse. Mom agreeing with him, and then they started monitoring my pills, counting them, accusing me of taking too many. Then last month, I found my prescription bottle empty. Mom said I must have taken them all in some kind of episode, but I hadn't. I know I hadn't. Rage bubbled up inside me again. That's abuse, Emily. That's medical abuse. She nodded slowly. I know, but where was I supposed to go? I don't have money for my own place. I lost my job at the gallery when I had that breakdown in October. You could have come to me, I said, fighting back tears. You should have come to me. You have your own life, Kate, your career, your students. I didn't want to be a burden. I put my arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. You could never be a burden to me. Never. She leaned against me, her body still trembling slightly. What am I going to do now? I can't go back there. You're coming home with me, I said firmly. To Asheville. We'll get your things tomorrow when they're out at Christmas service. But my doctor, my prescriptions, we'll figure it out. I know people. One of my students is a psychiatrist. He'll help us get your medication transferred. Emily pulled away slightly, looking at me with uncertainty. You'd do that? Let me live with you. In a heartbeat, I assured her. That's what big sisters are for. For the first time that night, a small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Thank you, she whispered. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from my mother. Please bring Emily home. Gerald is sorry. We're all sorry. It's Christmas. I showed the message to Emily, whose smile faded instantly. They're not sorry, she said quietly. They're just worried about what the neighbors will think when I'm not at Christmas dinner tomorrow. I deleted the message without responding and set my phone aside. Get some rest, I told Emily. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. While Emily slept, I sat by the window, watching the snowfall and making plans. We would need to get her clothes, her important documents, her medications if there were any left. We would need to change her address, transfer her medical care, help her find a new therapist in Asheville. My life would change too. My small one-bedroom apartment would now house two. My carefully structured routine would have to accommodate Emily's needs. But none of that mattered. What mattered was getting her safe, getting her well. I thought about my mother, about the woman she had been before Gerald came into our lives. She had been strong once, fierce in her protection of Emily and me after our father died. She had worked 2 jobs to keep us in our modest home, had attended every school event, had taught us to stand up for ourselves and each other. What had happened to that woman? When had she decided that Gerald's approval was worth more than her daughter's well-being? My phone buzzed again. Another text from my mother. Gerald says if Emily doesn't come home tomorrow, she shouldn't come back at all. Please don't do this to our family, as if Gerald and Ashley were more our family than Emily and I were to each other. I typed a response, my fingers trembling with anger. Emily is coming home. With me, to Asheville. If you ever want to see either of your daughters again, you'll help us get our things tomorrow without Gerald interfering. I hit send before I could reconsider, then silenced my phone and set it face down on the table. Across the room, Emily stirred in her sleep, murmuring something inaudible. I went to her, smoothing her hair back from her forehead the way I used to when she was small and had nightmares. It's okay, I whispered, though I knew she couldn't hear me. I've got you now. You're safe. As I settled into my own bed, exhaustion finally catching up to me, I made a silent promise to my sister, to myself, and to the memory of our father. This time, I wouldn't walk away. This time, I would fight for what remained of our family. And somehow, someway, I would make sure Emily never spent another Christmas shivering in the cold. Morning came with weak winter sunlight filtering through the motel's thin curtains. I woke before Emily, watching her sleep peacefully for the first time since I'd found her. The haunted look had left her face in slumber, making her appear younger, more like the sister I remembered from before I left home. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my mother and a text message that simply read, Gerald will be at church until noon. I'll help you get Emily's things. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I showed Emily the message when she finally stirred. She read it silently, then handed the phone back to me. She's afraid, Emily said, her voice still rough with sleep. Of Gerald? Emily nodded. She's always afraid of disappointing him, of making him angry. She pushed herself up to sitting position, wincing slightly. That's why she went along with everything. Why she let him lock you outside? I finished when she trailed off. That and other things. Emily looked down at her hands. He never hit me, if that's what you're wondering. It wasn't that kind of abuse. Emotional abuse is still abuse, I said firmly. I know. But Mom, I think she's a victim too, in her own way. I wanted to be angry at Emily for defending our mother, but I couldn't. That was Emily always looking for the good in people, always making excuses. It was what made her so vulnerable to Gerald's manipulation. Get dressed, I said, changing the subject. We'll grab breakfast, then meet Mom at the house. The sooner we get your things, the sooner we can be on our way back to Asheville. Emily looked uncertain. Do you think she'll really help us? I think she wants to avoid a scene, I said honestly. And right now, that works in our favor. An hour later, we pulled up in front of the sprawling Tudor-style house in Maple Ridge Estates. In daylight, it looked even more imposing, a monument to Gerald's wealth and status in the community. I remembered how impressed I'd been when Mom first married him and moved them into this neighborhood. How I'd thought maybe, just maybe, things were looking up for our family. I couldn't have been more wrong. My mother was waiting for us at the door, her face tight with anxiety. She wore her church clothes, a modest navy dress and pearls, though she had clearly not gone to service with Gerald. You have about an hour, she said by way of greeting, stepping aside to let us in. Ashley went with him, but they'll be back for Christmas brunch at 1. No hug, no apology for last night. Just logistics. I shouldn't have been surprised, but it stung nonetheless. We'll be quick. I promised. Emily headed straight upstairs to her bedroom. And I followed, but my mother caught my arm as I passed. Catherine, she said, her voice low. This isn't what I wanted. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. She had aged, fine lines etching their way around her eyes and mouth. Her hair, once a warm brown like mine, was now perfectly colored and styled, not a strand out of place. Even her nails were manicured, something the mom I grew up with would have considered an unnecessary luxury. What did you want, Mom? I asked quietly. Because from where I'm standing, you chose a man who emotionally abuses your daughter over your own children. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. It's not that simple. It seems pretty simple to me. Emily needed help, and instead of protecting her, you let Gerald convince you she was making it all up. You let him take away her medication. You let him lock her outside in freezing temperatures. I didn't know he'd done that, she whispered, her eyes darting nervously to the front door as if Gerald might walk in at any moment. About the medication. I thought she was just being dramatic about needing it. Gerald said, I don't care what Gerald said, I cut her off. I care what you did. Or didn't do. She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. You don't understand what it's like, she said. Being alone at my age? Before Gerald, I had nothing. No security. No future. You had us, I said, my throat tight with unshed tears. You had your daughters. And you left, she replied, a flash of the old fire in her eyes. You went off to college and never came back. Emily was going to leave too. What was I supposed to do? Grow old alone? I wanted to argue, to defend my choices, but this wasn't the time. Emily needed me focused on her, not on rehashing old wounds with our mother. We need to pack, I said instead, pulling away from her grasp. Emily's clothes, her documents, anything important to her. My mother nodded, resignation in her expression. I'll help. Upstairs, Emily was methodically placing clothes into a suitcase, her movements precise and controlled. Too controlled, I realized. She was keeping herself together by focusing on the task at hand. Mom's going to help us, I told her. What else do you need besides clothes? My journals, Emily said immediately. My art supplies. And there's a box under my bed with Dad's things, his watch, his dog tags. I need those. Our mother appeared in the doorway, holding a small orange prescription bottle. I found these, she said, extending them toward Emily. In Gerald's desk drawer. I'm sorry. Emily took the bottle, her hands trembling slightly. My Lexapro, she said, her voice a mix of relief and bitterness. He told me I'd use them all. Our mother looked away, shame coloring her cheeks. I should have checked. I should have known he was lying. Yes, I agreed coldly. You should have. We worked in tense silence after that, packing Emily's life into suitcases and boxes. Her room, I noticed, was the one unchanged space in the house, still painted the soft lavender she had chosen as a teenager, still decorated with her own artwork and photographs of our family from before. Before Gerald. Before everything changed. As Emily carefully wrapped her art supplies, my mother approached me again, her voice barely audible. "What should I tell him?" she asked. "When he comes home and finds her gone?" I looked at her incredulously. "Tell him the truth. That you chose your daughter over his abuse." She shook her head, fear flashing in her eyes. "You don't understand." He'll what?" I challenged. "Hit you? Throw you out in the snow? Or just cut off your access to his money?" Her silence was answer enough. "Come with us," I said suddenly, surprising even myself. "You don't have to stay with him, Mom. We can figure something out." For a moment, just a moment, hope flickered across her face. Then she glanced at her diamond wedding ring, at the expensive furnishings around us, and the hope died. "This is my home," she said quietly. "My life. A life where you let your husband abuse your daughter." She flinched again but didn't deny it. "I'll help you get her things to your car." We had almost finished loading the car when the sound of tires on the driveway made us all freeze. A black Mercedes SUV pulled up behind my rental car, and Gerald stepped out, his expression thunderous. Ashley followed, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "What the hell is going on here?" Gerald demanded, striding toward us. My mother stepped forward, her body physically placing itself between Gerald and Emily. "They're just getting Emily's things," she said, her voice higher than normal. "She's going to stay with Catherine for a while." Gerald's eyes narrowed. "I see. And you thought it was appropriate to help them behind my back? On Christmas Day?" "It's what's best for Emily," our mother said, a tremor in her voice. Gerald laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Since when do you know what's best for anyone, Margaret? If it weren't for me, you'd still be living in that tiny house, working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on." I stepped forward, placing myself beside my mother. "That's enough." Gerald turned his attention to me, his contempt evident. "Always the protector, aren't you, Catherine? Tell me, where were you when your sister was having her episodes? When she was too depressed to get out of bed? When she was wasting her talent on self-pity? Where was I?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I was building a life for myself, trusting that my mother and her husband would care for my sister. Clearly, I was wrong to trust you with anything." Emily touched my arm. "Kate, let's just go. Please." Gerald's gaze shifted to Emily, and his expression softened into something almost pitying. "Emily, darling, you're not thinking clearly. You need structure, routine. Catherine can't give you what you need." "What she needs," I said firmly, "is to be away from you." The drive back to our motel was silent, the weight of the confrontation hanging heavy between us. Emily stared out the window, her face a mask of carefully controlled emotion. I kept replaying the scene in my mind. Gerald's cold fury, my mother's trembling defiance, Ashley's smug satisfaction at the family drama unfolding before her. She stood up to him, Emily finally said as we pulled into the motel parking lot. "Mom," she actually stood up to him. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That small act of courage from our mother had surprised me too. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough to make up for months of neglect and complicity in Emily's abuse, but it was something. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Emily asked, worry creasing her brow. I said carefully, "that Mom made her choice a long time ago, and she has to live with it." Emily looked down at her hands. "I feel guilty leaving her there with him." "She's an adult, Em. She could have come with us," I offered. "But she's afraid." "Yes," I agreed. "She is, and fear is a powerful thing. But so is love. And if she loved us, loved you enough, she would have found the courage to leave." Emily didn't respond to that, and I didn't push it. We had a long journey ahead of us, literally and figuratively. There would be time for her to process everything that had happened, to grieve the mother she thought she had, and accept the reality of the one she actually did. Inside our room, Emily began sorting through her belongings, meticulously organizing what we had hastily packed. I watched her, reminded of how she had always found comfort in order, in having everything in its proper place. "I called Jake," I told her, referring to my friend who worked as a psychiatrist in Asheville. "He's going to help us get you set up with a new doctor as soon as we get back. And he says you can get an emergency refill of your prescription at any pharmacy with the bottle we found." Emily nodded, holding up the orange prescription bottle as if it were a precious artifact. I knew I wasn't crazy, she said softly. I knew I hadn't taken them all. Of course you weren't crazy, I said firmly. Gerald was gaslighting you, Em, making you doubt your own reality. That's what abusers do. She looked up at me, her eyes suddenly sharp with insight. Is that why you left? She asked. After Dad died? Because of how Gerald treated you? The question caught me off guard. I had never discussed my reasons for leaving with Emily, had never wanted to burden her with my own grievances against our stepfather. Partly, I admitted. But mostly I left because I had the opportunity to go to college on a scholarship. I thought Mom would be okay with Gerald. That you would be okay. I was at first, Emily said, folding a sweater with precise movements. He was actually nice to me in the beginning. Interested in my art, proud when I got into the university art program. She paused, her hands stilling. It wasn't until I started having anxiety attacks in my junior year that things changed. He said I was being weak, that I needed to toughen up. I sat on the bed across from her. Why didn't you tell me? She shrugged. You were building your life in Asheville. You seemed so happy, so free. I didn't want to drag you back into family drama. You're not family drama, Em. You're my sister. She gave me a small, sad smile. I know that now. My phone rang, interrupting the moment. Unknown number? I almost declined it, but something made me answer. Catherine? It's Mom. Her voice was strange tight, controlled, as if she were measuring every word. Mom, what's wrong? Emily looked up sharply at my tone. Nothing's wrong, my mother said too quickly. I wanted to make sure you and Emily got back to your motel safely. We did, I said cautiously. Mom, are you okay? Did Gerald? I'm fine, she cut me off. Gerald is upset, but he'll calm down. He always does. A pause then. I put some money in Emily's art supply box. It's not much, but it should help with the trip back to Asheville. I frowned. We don't need your money, Mom. I know. But I want to help. It's the least I can do. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear her breathing. Could almost see her gathering her courage. Catherine, she finally said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Take care of her, please. She deserves better than what she got here. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at my phone, a sick feeling settling in my stomach. What did she say? Emily asked, tension evident in her posture. I relayed the conversation, watching Emily's expression shift from concern to confusion. Why would she call from an unknown number? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe she didn't want Gerald to see she was calling us. Emily bit her lip, a nervous habit from childhood. Check the art box, she said suddenly. The one with Dad's things. I retrieved the wooden box from one of the bags we'd packed and opened it. Inside were the items Emily had mentioned: our father's watch, his dog tags from his military service, a few photographs. And tucked beneath them, an envelope containing $500 in cash and a handwritten note. I'm sorry. For everything. Be safe, be happy. I love you both. Mom, she's saying goodbye, Emily whispered, reading over my shoulder. The sick feeling intensified. I don't like this, I said. Something feels wrong. Emily nodded, her face pale. Should we go back? Check on her? I thought of Gerald's anger, of my mother's fear, of the way she had placed herself between him and Emily in those final moments at the house. Yes, I decided. We should. The drive back to Maple Ridge Estates seemed to take forever, though in reality it was less than 30 minutes. The neighborhood was quiet, the streets empty on Christmas afternoon. Snow had begun to fall again, light flurries that dusted the windshield of our rental car. As we turned onto my mother's street, the first thing I noticed was the police car parked in front of their house, its lights flashing silently in the gathering dusk. Oh no, Emily breathed beside me. Kate, what? I parked behind the police car, my heart pounding. Stay here, I told Emily, but she was already opening her door, following me toward the house. A young officer met us on the front walk, his expression grim. Excuse me, ma'am, but this is a private residence. I'm going to have to ask you to— This is my mother's house, I interrupted. What's happened? Is she okay? The officer's face changed, recognition dawning. Are you Catherine Ellison? Yes, this is my sister Emily. What's going on? He hesitated, clearly weighing how much to tell us. There was an incident, he finally said. Your mother is fine, but before he could finish, the front door opened and my mother emerged, wrapped in a blanket, a female officer at her side. Her face was streaked with tears, a bruise darkening on her left cheek. "Mom!" Emily cried, pushing past the officer to reach her. My mother looked up, surprise and relief washing over her face. "Emily, Catherine, what are you doing here?" "You called me," I reminded her, my eyes fixed on the bruise. "Your note." "We were worried." She touched her cheek self-consciously. "It's nothing. I'm fine." The female officer beside her cleared her throat. "Mrs. Whitmore, we need to get your statement. And the EMTs want to check you over. Where's Gerald?" I asked, looking past them into the house. My mother's eyes filled with fresh tears. "They arrested him," she whispered. After you left, he was so angry. He said it was my fault, that I'd turned my own daughters against him. He's never hit me before, never. But today, something in him just snapped." Emily wrapped her arms around our mother, holding her close. "I'm so sorry," she murmured. "This is all my fault." "No," my mother said firmly, pulling back to look at Emily. "No, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. It's mine. I should have protected you. I should have seen what he was doing to you. What he was doing to all of us." I stood there, watching them, a storm of emotions churning inside me, relief that my mother was physically okay. Rage at Gerald, guilt that our departure had triggered his violence, and beneath it all, a tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the wake-up call our mother needed. The female officer touched my arm. "Your mother will need to come to the station to file a formal complaint." "Domestic violence cases? I understand," I said. "We'll go with her." The police station was a stark, fluorescent-lit building that smelled of industrial cleaner and coffee. My mother sat rigid in a plastic chair, her eyes fixed on the form in front of her, pen hovering uncertainly over the paper. Emily and I flanked her like sentinels, neither of us speaking as she struggled to put into words what had happened. "I don't know if I can do this," she finally whispered. So quietly I almost missed it. "You can," I assured her, placing my hand over hers. "You have to." She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears. "He'll hate me." "Good," I said firmly. "Let him hate you from a jail cell." "It's not that simple, Catherine," she protested weakly. "We have accounts together. The house is in his name. I don't have anywhere to go." "You have us," Emily interjected, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in days. "You can come to Asheville with us. We'll figure it out together." Our mother looked between us, disbelief and hope warring on her face. "After everything? After how I failed you both?" I swallowed hard, wrestling with my own feelings. Part of me, a loud, angry part, wanted to agree with her assessment. She had failed us, especially Emily. She had chosen a man over her daughters. She had enabled abuse. But the other part of me, the part that remembered the mother who had taught me to ride a bike and bandaged my scraped knees, who had worked double shifts to keep food on our table after Dad died, who had once been the strongest woman I knew, that part couldn't abandon her now. "We're family," I said simply. "Real family doesn't give up on each other." The words hung in the air between us, both an accusation and an absolution. My mother nodded once decisively and bent over the form again. This time the pen moved steadily across the paper, filling in details, dates, incidents. Not just from today, but from years of subtle controlling behavior, financial manipulation, isolation tactics. As she wrote, I saw Emily's expression shift from surprise to recognition, to a grim validation. Her experiences weren't isolated incidents, but part of a pattern of abuse that had ensnared our entire family. When she finished, my mother handed the form to the waiting officer with hands that trembled only slightly. "What happens now?" she asked. "Mr. Whitmore will be formally charged," the officer explained. "Given the holidays, he'll likely remain in custody until his arraignment. The prosecutor will contact you about next steps, and you'll want to speak with a victim advocate about getting a restraining order." My mother flinched at the word victim, but nodded her understanding. "Do you have a safe place to stay tonight?" the officer continued. "Sometimes in these situations, it's best not to return to the home immediately." Before my mother could respond, I spoke up. "She's coming with us? We have a motel room for tonight, and then we're heading back to Asheville." The officer nodded approvingly. "That's good. Distance can help in the early stages." She handed my mother a card. "This has the number for our victim services unit. They can help you navigate the legal process and connect you with support resources. As we left the station, night had fully descended, the streets empty on Christmas evening. The snow had stopped, leaving behind a crystalline stillness that made our footsteps sound unnaturally loud. "We should get your things from the house," I told my mother as we reached the car. "Clothes, important documents, anything you need immediately." She nodded mutely, staring out the window as we drove through the deserted streets back to Maple Ridge Estates. The house looked different now, not imposing, just hollow. The Christmas lights that adorned the neighboring homes only emphasized the darkness of Gerald's mansion. Inside, Emily went straight to our mother's room to help her pack while I gathered essential documents from Gerald's study, the marriage certificate, house deed, bank statements, anything that might be needed for divorce proceedings. As I sorted through the papers in his desk, I found a file labeled simply Emily. Inside were her medical records, prescription information, and a series of notes in Gerald's precise handwriting documenting what he called her episodes and manipulative behavior. My blood ran cold as I read his clinical dissection of my sister's mental health struggles, his strategies for curing her dependency on medication, his plans to toughen her up. It wasn't just casual cruelty, it was calculated, systematic abuse disguised as concern. I slipped the file into my bag, unsure whether to show it to Emily or my mother, but certain it might be important evidence later. When I returned to the bedroom, I found my mother sitting on the edge of her bed, holding a framed photograph of our father. "I used to think about him all the time," she said without looking up. "What he would think of my choices, whether he would be proud of how I raised you girls after he was gone." Emily and I exchanged glances but remained silent, letting her speak. "I was so afraid of being alone," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "When Gerald came along with his money and his promises of security, I thought I'd won the lottery." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I sold my soul for financial stability." "It's not your fault," Emily said gently, sitting beside her. "Gerald he's very good at making people believe what he wants them to believe." My mother looked up, her eyes clear and sad. "But it is my fault that I chose him over you. That I didn't see what he was doing to you, Emily, or that I saw it and did nothing because I was too afraid of losing everything." "You didn't lose everything," I said, moving to sit on her other side. "You still have us." She reached out, taking one of each of our hands in hers. "I don't deserve you. Either of you. Maybe not," I acknowledged honestly. "But we're still here." We finished packing in silence, taking only what she would need immediately. Clothes, toiletries, medications, a few photographs, her jewelry. Everything else could wait. As we were leaving, the phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet house. We all froze, staring at it as if it might explode. "It's probably Gerald," my mother said, her face paling. "Calling from the jail." I stepped forward and unplugged the phone from the wall. "He doesn't get to talk to you anymore," I said firmly. "Not until you're ready, and maybe not even then." Back at the motel, we rearranged the room to accommodate my mother. Emily insisted she take one of the beds, while Emily and I would share the other. My mother protested weakly, but eventually relented, the exhaustion of the day catching up with her. As she showered, Emily and I sat at the small table by the window, speaking in hushed tones. "Do you think she'll really go through with it?" Emily asked. "The charges? The divorce?" I sighed, uncertain. "I hope so. But it won't be easy. Gerald has resources, connections, and he'll fight dirty. Like he did with me," Emily said, her gaze drifting to the orange prescription bottle on the nightstand. "Using my mental health against me." I hesitated, then pulled the file from my bag. "I found this in his study," I told her, sliding it across the table. "You should know what you're up against." Emily opened the file, her expression hardening as she read. "He was documenting everything," she said, voice tight with anger. "Every time I cried, every panic attack, every dose of medication I took. He was building a case that I was unstable. Probably so he could control your inheritance from Dad," I said grimly. "The trust fund comes to you when you turn 25, right? Less than 3 years away." Emily looked up, realization dawning. "You think that's what this was all about? Money? With Gerald, it's always about money. Or power, or both." The bathroom door opened and my mother emerged, wrapped in the motel's thin robe, her wet hair making her look younger, more vulnerable. "What's that?" she asked, noticing the file in Emily's hands. Emily and I exchanged glances, silently debating whether to show her. Finally, I nodded. She needed to see the full extent of Gerald's manipulation. As she read, my mother's expression cycled through disbelief, horror, and finally a cold, hard anger I hadn't seen in her since the days right after our father died, when she had faced down insurance companies and bill collectors with fierce determination. "He will not get away with this," she said when she finished, closing the file with a decisive snap. "Any of it." For the first time since we'd arrived in Boise, I felt a flicker of hope. The mother I remembered, the fighter, the protector, was still in there somewhere. "Get some sleep," I told them both. Tomorrow we head home to Asheville, and then we figure out our next steps. As I lay beside Emily in the darkened room, listening to her breathing even out into sleep, I found myself thinking about the strange, twisted path that had led us here. If my flight hadn't been delayed, if I hadn't decided to surprise them for Christmas, if I hadn't found Emily in that backyard, I shuddered, pushing the thought away. I had found her. That was what mattered. And now, somehow, we would rebuild what Gerald had tried to destroy our family. The drive from Boise to the airport the next morning was tense with unspoken emotions. Emily sat in the back seat with our mother, the two of them occasionally murmuring to each other but mostly silent, each lost in her own thoughts. I focused on the road, on the practical details of getting 3 people on a flight that had been booked for 1, on the logistics of reshaping my life to include not just Emily, but our mother as well. At the airport, I left them at a cafe table while I approached the ticket counter, prepared to pay whatever it cost to get us all home. To my surprise, the airline representative was sympathetic to our situation. "Family emergency, huh?" she said, typing rapidly on her keyboard. "Let's see what we can do." Within 20 minutes, she had rearranged our booking 3 seats together on a flight to Charlotte with a connection to Asheville, departing in 2 hours. The change fees were minimal, a small Christmas miracle that I accepted gratefully. "We're all set," I told Emily and our mother when I returned to the cafe. "Flight leaves at 11:40. My mother looked up from her untouched coffee. "Catherine, I can't let you pay for this. For any of it. I have some money saved that Gerald doesn't know about." "We'll figure out the money later," I interrupted gently. "Right now, let's just focus on getting home." Home. The word hung between us, charged with meaning. For me, home was my small apartment in Asheville, my dojo, my students. For Emily, home had been a battleground, a place of fear and uncertainty. And for our mother, home had been a gilded cage, a prison of her own making. "I've been thinking," I continued, "about the logistics. My apartment only has 1 bedroom, but the living room is decent-sized. We can get a sleeper sofa, maybe set up a room divider for privacy. It won't be fancy, but no," my mother said firmly. "I won't impose on you like that," I frowned. "Mom, you heard what the officer said. It's not safe for you to go back to that house, even with Gerald in custody." "I'm not going back to the house," she clarified. "But I'm not going to crowd into your apartment either. I have options." Emily and I exchanged confused glances. "What options?" Emily asked. Our mother took a deep breath. "Your Aunt Susan in Charlotte. She's been asking me to visit for years, ever since your father died. I called her this morning while you were both still asleep." "Aunt Susan?" I repeated, surprised. "Dad's sister? I thought you two didn't get along." "We didn't," my mother admitted. "But that was Gerald's doing, really. He thought she was a bad influence because she kept telling me I deserved better than him." She gave a sad smile. "Turns out she was right. So you're going to stay with her?" Emily asked, her voice small. Our mother reached across the table, taking one of each of our hands. "Just until I get on my feet. Susan has a guest room, and she knows a lawyer who specializes in divorce cases like mine. And Charlotte isn't far from Asheville. I can visit often, be part of your lives again, if you'll let me." I studied her face, searching for signs of the weakness, the dependency, that had characterized her relationship with Gerald. Instead, I saw determination, a fragile but growing strength. "Are you sure?" I asked. "This is a big step." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "You girls need space to heal, to rebuild your relationship without me complicating things. And I need to remember who I was before Gerald, who I can be on my own." I felt a complex mix of emotions, relief that I wouldn't have to completely rearrange my life, guilt for feeling that relief, and a tentative respect for my mother's decision to stand on her own. "If that's what you want," I said finally, "we'll support you." Our flight was called soon after, and as we boarded the plane, I couldn't help but think about how different this trip home was from the one I had planned. I had come to Boise alone, expecting a brief, probably tense visit with my sister. Now I was returning with both Emily and our mother, our lives irrevocably changed. The flight attendant's voice came over the intercom, instructing us to turn off electronic devices. As I reached for my phone to switch it to airplane mode, it buzzed with an incoming text. "Unknown number. Tell Margaret this isn't over." She's my wife. She belongs with me. And Emily needs help only I can provide. I stared at the message, a chill running through me. Somehow Gerald had managed to get a phone in jail. Or worse, he was already out. I showed the text to my mother, watching her face pale. "Block the number," she said, her voice steadier than I expected. "And when we land, we'll call the detective handling the case. Gerald isn't going to scare me anymore." I did as she suggested, then turned off my phone. As the plane began to taxi down the runway, Emily leaned across from her window seat. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing my expression. I forced a smile. "Fine. Just thinking about everything we need to do when we get home." She nodded, seemingly satisfied, and turned back to look out the window as we lifted into the air, leaving Boise and Gerald behind. But I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me. Gerald wasn't the type to give up easily. He had resources, connections, and now he had a grudge against all three of us. The flight to Charlotte was smooth, our connection tight but manageable. As we waited at the gate for our final flight to Asheville, my mother excused herself to call Aunt Susan and confirm their arrangements. "Are you sure you're okay with this?" Emily asked once we were alone. "Mom staying with Aunt Susan instead of coming with us?" I considered the question carefully. "I think it's the right choice for now," I said. "Mom needs to figure out who she is without Gerald." "And you and I? We need time too," Emily nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't shown up on Christmas Eve." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't torture yourself with what-ifs." "But you did come," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "You found me. You saved me." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You would have saved yourself eventually, Em. You're stronger than you know." She didn't look convinced, but she returned the pressure of my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Our mother returned then, her face lighter than it had been in days. "Susan is going to meet us at the Charlotte airport," she announced. "She says her guest room is all ready, and she's made my favorite lasagna for dinner." "That sounds wonderful," I said sincerely. "I'm glad you'll be taken care of." "I'm a grown woman, Catherine," she reminded me, a hint of her old spirit surfacing. "I can take care of myself." "I know," I acknowledged. "But it's nice to have support while you do it." She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Yes, it is." When we landed in Charlotte, Aunt Susan was waiting as promised, her arms open wide. I hadn't seen her in years, not since our father's funeral. But she looked the same tall and sturdy, with his same kind eyes and no-nonsense manner. "There are my girls," she called, embracing first Emily, then me, and finally our mother, who stiffened momentarily before relaxing into the hug. "Come on, Margaret, let's get you home. These two have a connection to catch." As we said our goodbyes, my mother held on to each of us a little longer than necessary. "I'll call as soon as I'm settled," she promised. "And I'll come visit in a few weeks once everything with Gerald is more resolved." "We'll be waiting," Emily assured her. We watched them walk away, Aunt Susan's arm protectively around our mother's shoulders, until they disappeared into the crowd. "She'll be okay," Emily said, sounding as if she were trying to convince herself. "She will," I agreed. "And so will we." The first month in Asheville passed in a blur of adjustments and healing. Emily settled into my apartment with surprising ease, her quiet presence filling spaces I hadn't realized were empty. We established routines: morning coffee together before I left for the dojo, evening walks along the French Broad River, takeout dinners when neither of us felt like cooking. Simple pleasures that helped stitch the frayed edges of our relationship back together. With Jake's help, Emily found a psychiatrist who specialized in trauma and anxiety disorders. Dr. Reeves was a soft-spoken woman with keen eyes and infinite patience. Under her care, Emily began to blossom again, reclaiming pieces of herself that Gerald's emotional abuse had chipped away. Our mother called every Sunday without fail. Her voice grew stronger with each conversation, more certain. Aunt Susan had connected her with a divorce attorney with experience handling high-conflict cases, and the legal machinery was slowly grinding forward. Gerald had been released on bail, but was under strict orders to have no contact with any of us. The prosecutor says his case is solid, our mother told us during one call. Between the police report, the medical documentation of my injuries, and the file you found, Catherine, they're building a strong case for both domestic violence and emotional abuse. What about his money? I asked, always the practical one. His connections? Susan's lawyer says that's actually working against him now, she replied, a note of satisfaction in her voice. The judge doesn't appreciate Gerald trying to use his influence to pressure the DA's office. And apparently several other women have come forward, previous secretaries, household staff, with similar stories of controlling behavior. Are you scared? Emily asked quietly. There was a pause before our mother answered. Sometimes, she admitted, but not like before. This is a different kind of fear. Not of Gerald himself, but of the unknown. Of starting over at my age, I understood that fear. It was the same one I had faced when I left home for college, when I opened my dojo, when I made the decision to bring Emily and our mother away from Boise. The fear of a new beginning. You're not alone this time, I reminded her. You have us. And Aunt Susan? I know, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. That makes all the difference. February brought heavy snow to the mountains surrounding Asheville. Emily, who had always loved winter, seemed to come alive in the cold, clean air. She began sketching again, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Her art had always been her sanctuary, her way of processing the world. Seeing her return to it was like watching a wounded bird test its mended wing. One evening, as we sat in our living room, Emily at the window seat with her sketchbook, me on the couch grading student papers, she suddenly looked up. I want to go back to school, she announced. I set aside my work. For art? She nodded, a flush of excitement coloring her cheeks. There's a program at UNC Asheville. A bachelor's in fine arts with a focus on studio art. The spring semester has already started, but I could apply for fall. That sounds perfect for you, I said, genuinely pleased. Do you need help with the application? Actually, she said, her voice taking on a shy note, I already applied. I just found out today I got in. With a partial scholarship. I stared at her, pride swelling in my chest. Emily, that's amazing. Why didn't you tell me you were applying? She looked down at her sketchbook. I wasn't sure I could do it. After everything with Gerald, he made me feel so incapable, so dependent. I needed to prove to myself that I could take this step on my own. I crossed the room and hugged her tightly. I'm so proud of you, I whispered. Dad would be too. She hugged me back, her slender frame no longer feeling quite so fragile. There's one more thing, she said when we pulled apart. I've been looking at student housing. I think it's time I had my own place again. I felt a twinge of loss at the thought of her leaving, but pushed it aside. This was exactly what we had been working toward: Emily's independence, her confidence in herself. Are you sure you're ready? I asked, not because I doubted her, but because I wanted her to be certain. I am, she said firmly. These months with you have been exactly what I needed. You gave me a safe place to land, to find my feet again. But now I need to stand on my own. I nodded, understanding completely. Then we'll start looking at apartments near campus. She smiled, relief evident in her expression. I already found one. It's a tiny studio, but it has great light for painting. And it's in my budget with the scholarship stipend and my savings. You've thought of everything, I said. Impressed. I learned from the best, she replied, bumping her shoulder against mine. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, I called our mother to share the news. That's wonderful, she said, genuine happiness in her voice. Emily deserves this chance to rebuild her life on her terms. What about you? I asked. How are things with the divorce proceedings? She sighed, the sound crackling over the phone line. Complicated. Gerald is fighting every step, trying to delay, to wear me down. But I'm not backing down, Catherine. Not this time. Good, I said firmly. And financially? Are you going to be okay? Better than okay, actually, she said, surprising me. I've been working with Susan's financial advisor. It turns out that when your father died, the insurance money didn't all go into the girls' trust funds. There was a separate policy, a smaller one, that was just for me. I put it in a separate account that Gerald never knew about. Smart move, I said, impressed. One of the few, she acknowledged ruefully. Anyway, it's enough to get me started again. And I've been interviewing for jobs. Jobs? Really? Don't sound so surprised, she chided gently. I was a legal secretary before I married your father, you know. Those skills don't just disappear. There's a family law firm here in Charlotte that's willing to take a chance on me, despite my gap in employment. I smiled into the phone. That's fantastic, Mom. I'm proud of you. Thank you, she said softly. That means more than you know. As spring bloomed across the Blue Ridge Mountains, so did our healing. Emily signed the lease on her studio apartment and began preparing for the fall semester. Our mother secured the job at the law firm and found a small apartment of her own, just 10 minutes from Aunt Susan's house. And I, somewhat to my surprise, started dating again, a fellow martial arts instructor named David who taught Brazilian jiu-jitsu at a gym across town. Life was moving forward, finding new rhythms, new paths. But Gerald's shadow still loomed over us all, a dark cloud on the horizon that we couldn't quite ignore. The call came on a Tuesday in late April. I was at the dojo, leading an afternoon class for teenagers. When my phone buzzed with a text from our mother, Gerald took a plea deal. No jail time, but 5 years probation, mandatory counseling, and most importantly, a permanent restraining order. It's over. Call me when you can. I read the message twice, emotions warring within me. Relief that the legal battle was ending, that our mother wouldn't have to testify in court. Anger that Gerald would serve no jail time for what he had done. Uncertainty about what "it's over" really meant when someone like Gerald was involved. That evening, Emily, our mother, who had driven up from Charlotte for the occasion, and I sat on my balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. So that's it? Emily asked, swirling the wine in her glass. He just gets away with it? Our mother shook her head. He doesn't get away with anything. His reputation in Boise is ruined. Half his business associates have cut ties with him. The country club revoked his membership. But no jail time, I pointed out. The prosecutor explained it to me, our mother said. A trial would have been messy, public, and with Gerald's resources, potentially winnable for him. This way, there's a legal record of his abuse. The restraining order is permanent. And if he violates probation in any way, he goes straight to jail. I wasn't entirely satisfied, but I nodded my acceptance. And the divorce? A smile spread across our mother's face, small but genuine. Finalized next month. I get half of everything, including the house, which I'm selling immediately. My lawyer says Gerald agreed because he's desperate to salvage what's left of his business reputation. What will you do with the money? Emily asked. Our mother reached across the small table, taking one of each of our hands in hers. Some of it goes into a security net for myself, some into your trust funds, to replace what Gerald tried to manipulate away from you, Emily. And some... She paused, her eyes bright with something I hadn't seen in years' hope. Some I want to put into a foundation, for women escaping abusive relationships. Women who don't have family to help them, like I had you two. I squeezed her hand, unexpectedly moved. That's really beautiful, Mom. Emily nodded, tears shimmering in her eyes. Dad would love that. Our mother smiled, her gaze drifting to the darkening sky. Yes, she said softly. I think he would, Christmas Eve, 1 year later. Snow fell gently outside the windows of my apartment, now decorated with simple but elegant holiday touches. A small tree in the corner, candles on the mantel, the scent of cinnamon and pine in the air. Emily had arrived from her campus apartment that morning, bringing armfuls of homemade gifts and a portfolio of her latest work to show us. Our mother and Aunt Susan had driven up from Charlotte the day before, laden with food and old family ornaments that had been stored in Susan's attic since our father died. The past year had been one of transformation for all of us. Emily had thrived in her art program, her work growing more confident and bold with each passing month. She had made friends, joined the campus art club, even started dating a quiet philosophy major named Michael, who looked at her like she hung the moon. Our mother had settled into her job at the law firm, where her personal experience with domestic violence made her particularly empathetic to clients in similar situations. Her foundation, which she had named simply New Beginnings, was small but growing, already helping 3 women start fresh lives away from their abusers. And I had expanded my dojo, adding classes specifically designed for survivors of trauma. The work was challenging but deeply fulfilling. Watching women and men who had been made to feel powerless reclaim their strength, their bodies, their dignity. As for Gerald, he had faded from our lives like a bad dream. He had tried to contact our mother once through an intermediary, offering a generous settlement if she would speak positively about him to mutual acquaintances. She had declined without hesitation. Some things, she told us later, are worth more than money, like self-respect. Now we gathered in my living room, the four of us plus David, who had become a steady, calming presence in my life, preparing to share our first Christmas Eve together as a reunited family. Before we eat, our mother said, standing by the fireplace, a glass of sparkling cider in her hand, I want to say something. We quieted, turning our attention to her. In the firelight, she looked both older and younger than she had a year ago, lines of experience etched more deeply around her eyes, but a lightness to her movements, a straightness to her spine that spoke of unburdened shoulders. 1 year ago tonight, our family was fractured, she began, her voice steady. I was living a lie. Emily was suffering in silence, and Catherine was building a life apart from us both. We were broken, each in our own way. Emily reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. And then, our mother continued, Catherine kicked down a door. A smile tugged at her lips. Literally and figuratively. She found Emily in that backyard, and she said 6 words that changed everything. You left her out to die. I shifted uncomfortably, the memory still raw. Those words were harsh, our mother acknowledged. But they were true. And sometimes the truth, no matter how painful, is exactly what we need to hear. She raised her glass slightly. So tonight I want to thank you, Catherine, for your courage, for your anger, for refusing to look away from what was happening to our family. I swallowed hard against the lump forming in my throat. Mom, she shook her head, stopping me. Let me finish. I also want to thank you, Emily, for your resilience, for continuing to create beauty even in the darkest times, for giving me a second chance I'm not sure I deserved. Emily wiped at her eyes, nodding silently. And Susan, our mother turned to her sister-in-law, for opening your home and your heart when I had nowhere else to go, for showing me what family truly means. Aunt Susan waved a hand dismissively, but I could see she was touched. A year ago, our mother concluded, I thought my life was over. I was wrong. It was just beginning. Again, she raised her glass higher. To new beginnings, to truth. To family the real kind. To family, we echoed, glasses clinking in the warm light. As we moved to the dining table, set with candles and the good china Aunt Susan had insisted on bringing, I found myself watching Emily. She was laughing at something David had said. Her face animated, her movements free and unguarded. So different from the trembling, broken young woman I had carried in from the cold last Christmas. She caught me watching and raised an eyebrow. What? Nothing, I said, smiling. Just happy you're here. Her expression softened with understanding. Me too. After dinner, while the others chatted over coffee and dessert, Emily pulled me aside to the small balcony. The snow was falling more heavily now, muffling the sounds of the city below. I have something for you, she said, handing me a flat, wrapped package. I wanted you to open it privately. Curious, I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a painting, one of Emily's, unmistakably, but unlike anything I had seen her create before. It depicted 2 figures standing in snow, one supporting the other, both facing a warm light in the distance. The brushwork was bold, emotional, the colors vibrant despite the wintry scene. It's us, she said softly. Last Christmas Eve, the moment everything changed. I traced the outline of the figures with my finger, emotion welling up in my chest. It's beautiful, Em, but there's no darkness in it. Because that's not what I remember most, she explained. What I remember is you, coming for me when I needed you most. Carrying me toward the light. She took a deep breath. You saved my life that night, Kate. Not just from the cold. From despair. From believing I deserved what was happening to me. I set the painting carefully aside and pulled her into a fierce hug. You saved yourself, I whispered into her hair. You survived. You held on until help could come. That's the bravest thing I know. We stood there in the gentle snowfall, holding each other, neither of us feeling the cold. Through the window, I could see our mother laughing with Aunt Susan, David refilling coffee cups, the tree lights twinkling in the background. A scene of ordinary family happiness that felt extraordinary after all we had been through. Eventually, we returned inside, drawn by the warmth and light. As I hung Emily's painting on the wall in a place of honor where everyone could see it, I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the pain, the fear, the difficult truths we had faced together. There would be more challenges ahead, I knew. Gerald might reappear in our lives. Old wounds might reopen. New struggles would certainly arise. But looking around at the faces of my family, Emily, our mother, Aunt Susan, even David, I felt a certainty settle deep in my bones. We would face whatever came next together. Not perfect, not unbroken, but stronger in the mended places. A real family. Later that night, as the others prepared for bed, I stood alone by the window, watching the snow transform the world outside into something pure and new. I thought of those 6 words I had spoken a year ago. Words born of rage and fear and love. You left her out to die. Words that had shattered one version of our family and begun the painful, beautiful process of creating another. I pressed my palm against the cold glass, feeling the contrast between the winter outside and the warmth within. And in that moment, I knew what my father would say if he could see us now. These 3 women who had lost their way and found each other again. Justice doesn't always come from courts or prisons. Sometimes it comes from the courage to speak truth, to walk back into the fire, and to carry out the ones we love. Sometimes it comes from simply opening a door,